Hello, friends. Welcome to Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is Revolutionizing the Road, Trimble's Tech Solutions with my friend Kelly Williams. How's it going, Kelly?
Hey, Jill. Thanks so much for having me today.
I'm excited to talk to you about this topic. Kelly, please introduce yourself and your company, where you're calling from today.
Hey, so I'm Kelly Williams, and I lead our product organization within the walls of Trimble Transportation. And I'm joining you here today from good old Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Very nice. Go Pack. So, Kelly, I've told you this before we hit record that I heard Trimble only one time on my podcast. Somebody said it, and I looked it up, and I was like, oh, this is a big company. I've done a lot of episodes, but I've never talked to Trimble. So I'm excited to talk to you about today. But Trimble, as I found out, is a huge company in the transportation space. So please detail some of, I know I recognize the products you guys had. I just didn't recognize Trimble as the parent company. So please explain some of the solutions you guys provide to the transportation space.
Yes, the Trimble name has all of these little gold nuggets tucked underneath that brand. And so Trimble as a whole is a technology company. And really the tagline here is transforming the way the world works. But within the transportation division specifically, we're really dedicated to transforming the way the world moves freight. It's all about that movement of goods. And one of the things that I think is important to call out here is some of the brands that people might be more familiar with, things like PC Miler, right? Most of us are using PC Miler somewhere to get miles on bids to use within our technologies. We also have things like Copilot, so we're right in the cab with the driver, fleet maintenance offering, and then probably one of our most well-known on the TMS side with our TMW Suite and TruckMate offerings. Just a couple of really quick stats just to talk about the magnitude of the impact that Trimble has in the industry. This is greater than 2 million assets being managed with Trimble's technology. 90% of the top 200 trucking fleets use our technology in some form or fashion.
Whoa. 90% of the top 200?
You got it.
That's incredible. And the other day I was talking to Brittany in your marketing department, and I mentioned a few other transportation management systems, and she said, oh yeah, they're partners. And so I started looking online. It seems as if companies that you would go, oh, they compete with Trimble. They don't. They might compete in some area, but they're partners in many others. And I'm going to the Trimble conference in Vegas, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And I was looking at who's going. I was like, this is the who's who of freight.
You got it. In this industry, because it's so fragmented, we really do have to work together as technology providers to create the efficiencies that are needed to make that, as I mentioned earlier, that movement of goods better.
Yep. So I want to talk about PC Miler for just a second. So I was at a little 3PL, and I remember the first time I heard somebody say PC Miler. So how is PC Miler used in this industry? And I'm thinking it is the standard in this industry.
It really is the standard, right? And so this is one of the areas where PC Miler is used in both the TMSs that Trimble has, but also out there with McLeod. It really is one of those underlying standards that have been established through the longevity that PC Miler has been with Trimble.
And what does it do?
So that's giving you the absolute miles that are applied to every movement of goods. So every order that we have from point A to point B, we're giving you the mileage package associated with it. It's got versions in it, so we can appropriately, for the shipper preferences, we can make sure that we're only giving miles on lanes that are truck friendly in nature. So all kinds of capabilities underlying just that providing of the mileage.
Yep. And I do remember, I've looked over a fair number of contracts. PC Miler is always listed in there because I have run across where somebody said, oh, this is 52 miles. And then somebody else says, no, it's 670 miles. And you're like, no, go by PC Miler because that is the industry standard. And people getting paid by the mile, it matters a lot that there's a standard.
It absolutely matters. Anywhere in this industry that we can find something that a standard is actually a standard is monumental.
By the way, there's a lot of things that people come on my podcast and say, "That's a standard." You're like, "You wish it was." But this really is a standard. So, Kelly, I started to talk about this conference that's coming up, which is the Trimble Insight Tech Conference, which I wrote down September 15th to the 17th in Las Vegas. I'll be there. All the cool kids will be. Please tell us about it.
Yeah, so you mentioned the dates, and we really believe that this is the transportation event of the year. And it really is about the who's who in the industry. You hit on the perfect point earlier. One of the things that I wanted to mention about this is really our partners, it's our competitors all in one conference with the sole goal of improving the movement of goods, making sure that the driver's life is in a good spot, the office talent that helps the movement of goods. What are the things that we can be doing better to serve the shipper at the end of the day? So it's a great networking opportunity. There's lots of booths, so you can meet with both those competitors and frenemies and partners that we have in the industry. One of the other things that's really great is there's a leadership aspect to our Insight conference. And so you're going to have some really great thought leaders from the industry, names that are very familiar to everyone. Craig Fuller from Freight Waves will be running a session. Dan Murray from ATRI doing a state of the industry. And the ATRI, that's one of the base things that I use in my decision making about the cost.
What is that?
So that ultimately gets after all of the metrics that you want to understand about trucking, the cost breakdown. They just do a fabulous job of breaking down that information and not just breaking it down to the cost of trucking, but specific to if I'm running refrigerated, if I'm running bulk. They really are they do a very fine job of kind of this agnostic, very data driven view of giving you the right tools and data to make good decisions. There's a lot of them out there. I just find that one's driven from carriers. And so I always find that to be really credible.
Yeah, and I've been to a lot of conferences. All of them have their plus side. I'm excited to go to this one. And by the way, I'm going to do some interviews. I don't know who I'm interviewing there. Brittany will figure that out between now and September. But there's going to be a lot of trucking companies there. And I think any conference where you can bring together the trucking companies with the technology is the right conference to be at, because there is a lot of this business that it's very important. I'm not saying it's not very important, but when you disconnect it from the carriers, and sometimes you find that there's the technologists, there's the brokers and 3PLs and warehousing and fulfillment, and then trucking. And when you segment them all separately, that means we're not all talking. And I want our technologies to be connecting us, not disconnecting.
That you've nailed the absolute goal of what our technology aims to do. And the one other thing that I'll add about the Insight Conference is this is an exciting year for us on many fronts because we're unveiling a lot of innovation at this particular conference. I think for a while we have been really innovating within our legacy products, and there's some next generation things that we're so excited to show our customers. So if you're interested in being one of the first to see that innovation, this is the perfect spot to come see it.
Excellent. Excellent. So I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, a link to your website, a link to this conference, and any other links you and your marketing team give me. We'll put those in the show notes. Let's talk a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined the mothership, Trimble.
That's just from a background standpoint. I mentioned that I grew up in the Green Bay, Wisconsin area and went to college really aiming to be impact on communication in organizations, help organizational change. I graduated from school and was like, all right, I just need a job in Green Bay. And Schneider National is one of the biggest employers in this area. And so I joined Schneider. I was there for 20 years.
Whoa.
And yeah, and the I was there during the Don Schneider era, and I just can't ever articulate enough to people how impactful being in that organization at that time has been, down to the inspirational talk that Don would give to the truck drivers as he did the onboarding of them, as well as the employees. At the end of every day, when you sit down with your family and you're having dinner, state thanks for the fact that a truck driver made that food on your table happen, right? And if trucking wasn't here, the impact that it would have on the industry. When you do your job with that motivation, you look at it from a different lens. And it's one of the things that impacted as I moved on from Schneider, wanting to work on the innovation side. How can we make this transportation industry better? How can we maybe create some standards, and how can we ultimately make it better on behalf of those truck drivers that I'm thankful for every day, and let them merge onto the highway? That's my little offering here. And then so ultimately got me started into working with some startups in this industry, which was something I never thought I would get into, but have really truly enjoyed. And that's how I joined the Trimble organization. With a startup that I was working on, became part of the Trimble organization. And I was asked to stay in Trimble. And as I talked about what's really important to me, it positively impacting the movement of goods, making the truck driver's life better, that domain expertise seemed to really resonate well in the Trimble organization. And so they gave me the opportunity to create and influence some next gen technology. And so I stayed with Trimble, and I'm just excited about what we're delivering.
Yep. It's interesting. I know you will agree with this, but this whole industry is based on truck driving. And when you started at Schneider so many years ago, there wasn't a ton of technology out there. It was very fragmented. When we talked the other day about this, is the truck is the ultimate technology. And we forget that because we are coming with all these breakthrough products that we talk about, and they're all important. But a lot of people in this industry, yours truly included, didn't come from trucking. And as you start these companies that are adjacent to the trucking business, that are the brokers, the 3PLs, all the technology companies, super important. But a lot of them get very disconnected from the truck driver and the trucks, which is the base. That is the foundation of this whole business. And the further you get away from it, the easier it is to be disconnected from what we need to do.
It really is very admirable that Trimble has stepped back and said, we want to be a technology provider, but we need truckers to help us build that technology. So the value placed on that domain expertise, because I'll tell you, as we're building our next gen technology, you can bet one of the first jobs that I did at Schneider was a CSR. You can bet that job's going to be better on the other side of this technology, because not a lot has changed since I've done that job. The technology, it hasn't changed significantly enough to impact things. So that's what I'm most delighted about, to be able to start to have an influence over.
Yeah, I was working for a short time at a trucking company. Wasn't a good fit where I was at, but I enjoyed my time there. And I remember talking to one of the drivers, and we were in the terminal. And you can see in that terminal, we could see the camera was on another driver's face. And then there was the view of, here's what the driver's seeing. And the driver I was talking to, I said, "Oh, this is cool." And he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "We've got the GPS tracking us. We've got the camera in our face, right? We got the camera." He goes, he goes, "I can't argue against any of it." But he made the point that, how is this making my life necessarily better? They want to be safe. They want to get home. And before we hit record, we were talking about how we're still not utilizing drivers in a way that makes it a great job. They're away from home too much. They're sitting around waiting to be unloaded when they should be at their kids' baseball game. We still have too much hassle. And we train tons of drivers every year. And then when somebody says we have a driver shortage, I think a lot of people are pushing back and say, we have plenty of drivers. We train plenty more who leave this industry because we're not making it a good job. And again, this is the foundation of the whole business. So everything else around it is getting better. Look at all this cool tech. Look at my analytics. why is the drivers, why are they quitting? Why are they going somewhere else?
Yes, you are hitting on the spot that is nearest and dearest to my heart. And again, that comes from that beginning at Schneider. But without a doubt, we have to make that job more efficient. And that has to come not just from the carrier side, it has to not just come from the technology side, but we also need some help on the shipper side as well to influence that. And I know that there's tons of initiatives that continue to come to fruition, but we haven't impacted it enough. And that's what has to happen.
Yep. I don't know if this is still true. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But a few years back, somebody said to me that drivers will go to one location for even less money. They make a little less money to go to one location that will get them unloaded quickly, where the paperwork is all taken care of, maybe electronically, where there might be an area where they could relax, a driver's lounge, if they want to shower. I think more importantly than a shower and a lounge where you can waste 2 hours, I think they want to be unloaded quickly and leave. But but where they've actually said, drivers are welcome here. We want you to be here. Now, I know I have been to terminals where I've seen, not terminals, locations where drivers are being unloaded where they're like, oh, go park over there. We'll call you when we're ready. And I keep thinking, if I drove 8 hours to see you in Green Bay and I got there and you said, hey, Joe, I'm actually not home. I'll be home in an hour. Just sit in the driveway. I'd be like, oh, I hate Kelly. Like,
Yeah.
how dare her, right? Yeah, we do it to drivers that's just normal. You drove all day, sit in your truck for an hour or two.
Yeah. One of the things that when I joined the Trimble organization that was starting to come to fruition is something called Trimble Places. And so it's starting to get after that problem that you're talking about, but in a really data driven way where we have the intel to understand the time of day for a driver to arrive at a pickup or delivery location. We can start to put some context around where to even pull in so they don't get into, oh, I had to turn around and I couldn't drive on this road just to enter into the wrong gate. So we're really trying to do all of the things in a really data driven, and that comes from that base of that PC Miler part of our organization is also has maps as part of it. And so we're able to leverage the combination of those things to provide some great intel. So that driver knows and actually before it even gets to the driver, this is the thing, we have to get to it way ahead of the driver impact. So when the customer service rep is accepting that order and they look at that consignee, they know, or that delivery point, they know I'm not going to schedule that appointment until 2 in the afternoon because it looks like the wait time is only 30 minutes at that point. We always have to be combining that technology piece with the real life experience that's out there.
Right. And it does remind me also, as you said, staying connected to the driver. For a long time, I heard people say, oh, we've created this wonderful app. Drivers can just download it onto their phone. And I was like, and after I heard it probably the 10th time, I thought, drivers don't want to download every new app out there. There's such thing as app fatigue out there. And also, you're tracking them. So maybe they're up at their cottage and they're getting a notification that says, hey, you want to pick up a load? They're like, I'm with my family. Please show you in this zip code, so pick up. And what seems like real easy, it is easy. And again, we're thinking not of drivers, we're thinking of what we do. And people don't always necessarily use all the apps. I think when we talk about standards, there's going to be certain apps that everybody downloads because and you just mentioned you guys are working with 90 some percent of the carriers of the top 200. That is a standard. The brand new app that they're trying to convince the driver to download, they're not going to do it, or they're going to download it and then they're going to delete it. People don't use that many apps, including drivers.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'll add a third aspect to that. Also, we don't want the driver on the phone while they're driving, right? We don't want, my 16-year-old, I don't want on the phone while they're driving. So There is a piece of this that we have to get right, and it's part of why, from my catalyst is, what is the end user that we're trying to make their life better? So what is the driver experience, and do they want those 6 things on their phone? As a customer service rep, what was the monotonous task that I wish they didn't have to do because I wanted to work on, like, how do I get ahead 3 days out? Those are the things that we're trying to consistently introduce artificial intelligence, business intelligence, and just that continuous improvement mindset. Bring those things into the technology, but make it persona based.
Yep. Before we hit record, we are prepping a little bit, and you said that there's been a ton of investment in the transportation space, and yet we haven't seen a lot of productivity improvement. Normally, if you invest, you want productivity improvement, you want some sort of ROI. Please elaborate on that.
Yeah, so this kind of became my burning platform in my case for change within the Trimble organization about what we do with our next gen technology. And it comes from the Department of Transportation publishes each year the productivity of each of the modes of transportation for supply chain. And in comparison to other modes of transportation, truck over the road is essentially flatlined. So, as I think about the fact that is relatively flat, then you look back and you're like, okay, since 1990, it's flat. And we've had, technologies coming into this industry, venture capital dollars coming in, so many new startups that are being pitched to the shipper side of things because that's where the money is. And so all of that has come into play, and we're still relatively flatlined. So this is the thing that is my, again, burning platform to impact with the technology at Trimble. We want to make sure productivity line can start to head north. So that's where we're focused, and that's the catalyst on my side.
Yep. It reminds me a little bit. I don't know if you've ever looked in the history of CRMs, customer relationship management. I think a lot of people listening go, oh, I have to use a CRM. And there has been this push and pull on that. Initially, CRMs were there to say, okay, I've got these 20 sales guys. I want to make sure they're actually working. I think they're just wandering around the country and having lunch. And so it was a top-down. Management wants to track what you're doing. And I've been a sales guy where somebody says, you need to add 20 new leads this week. And you're like, oh, I don't have 20, but yeah, okay, I'll figure something out. So you figure it out, you put them in there, and then the next week, how many are you going to close? You're like, 7 of them were fake, right? And so did it improve the salesman productivity that he had to enter all that in? Maybe not. There's certainly no one right answer to it. But if I created, and then this is the other side of it, which is if the CRM was created to make the sales guy's life easier and to make it easier for him to make sales, okay, that's a good CRM. But we always had this push and this pull with that. And I believe we have the same thing going on with the drivers. What tools are there to make their life better versus what tools are there to make the shippers, the brokers, the 3PLs happier, and maybe trucking management happier? They're both important. Obviously, there are other people other than the driver, but I think your point is no productivity, all this VC money, all of this private equity money, all this new technology. We're suddenly the cool kids in tech, and where's the beef?
And how many of them are still around, right? That's the other piece. Who you partner with in this journey of new technology is also really important as well.
So why aren't we having that impact? Where's that? So if that money is being spent, where's the impact? And why aren't we? These are smart people developing tools, and why aren't we seeing the impact? We should see ROI. Where is it?
Yes, yeah. My belief on this is that it's not coming to fruition because the workflows are really disconnected as one kind of underlying problem. And then the industry, which this is a no duh, but the industry is super fragmented. And so for those two reasons, we really feel like the technologies in their individual states are not really having that impact to the productivity number that we talked about earlier. So, our belief is that we have to introduce those components, partner with startups, but make sure that it happens in the existing workflow, the execution technology like the TMS. Those technologies are not going anywhere. The carriers need those. They're the backbones of their organization. That's a quote from one of our carriers. Your technology is the backbone of our organization. So those TMSs aren't going anywhere. And so we'll take this opportunity in that transportation management system to introduce those improvements directly in those workflows.
Yep. I think it helps when, again, you guys are already working with 97% of the top 200. What's different about logistic, or I should say transportation and trucking compared to other industries, when I think I'm from automotive, there's 10 big automotive companies, OEMs, and it's a mature industry. When we go over to the trucking business, I think the largest trucking company has less than 2% of the market. And then I think the long tail of trucking is that most of the volume or a big chunk of the volume?
All of it, right? More than 90% of the carriers have less than 20 trucks.
Yeah. And so I think the only way to create a standard is going to be with the big guys, and hopefully the little guys are adopting because the big guys have it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Joe, that maybe I'll touch on a little bit more. As we're building out the technology, we want to be thoughtful about building it out in a way that accomplishes that workflow improvement. Maybe not necessarily this larger carrier has done business this way and wants this in the technology. We're getting back to pretty basic product development, which is build a prototype, make sure that you're improving the workflow and the persona that's going to use it. And we're engaging with our carriers very early in the process. And I don't know that Trimble has always done that to the depth that we're doing it today. So we have an early engagement portal with all of our new technologies, all of our next gen technologies that we're building. And in there, we're asking, and this is probably the interesting, this might be controversial in nature, but we're asking for the decision makers to stay out of the early engagement portal. What we really want is that frontline person. When we're talking about the driver, we want the driver in the portal if they can be, but on the TMS side and in the maintenance side of things, on the maintenance side, we want the shop individual in there giving us feedback on the prototypes, again, before we have the engineering team building them. In our TMS, we have our customer service reps. We have 90 different customers in there. It's the frontline person giving us feedback just to make sure not only are we solving the right problems, does the workflow make sense, and it helps us for adoption on the other side. Then when we're building it, we're not spending that really expensive engineering time building something that may not be adopted further down the road.
I think you mentioned Trimble not always doing that. I would say that in general, product development and technology development, traditionally, until the last 10 years, last 15 years, we tended to have these people who are in the technology side, a lot of very introverted, very smart. They could develop great products. They didn't need to hear from the customer. And if you did ask the customer was always too busy to talk to you about what their needs were. And sometimes the customer doesn't always articulate what their needs are. And I'm from automotive, and I know when I worked in product development there, we said we were connected to the customer, but we just didn't spend enough time doing it. And now I think there's just so much more focus on asking the right questions, and you have to ride along with them and see what they're doing and ask them what their problems are and then develop that way. It reminds me, it was a million years ago, but I was a product studio in an automotive company, and it was this beautiful minivan that we were developing, and it was a prototype. And I remember some vice president came, and he was a tall guy, 6'4", heavy too, big guy. And he had a cigar. That's how how long ago it was. And he got in this minivan, and he said, and he started moving his cigar. He goes, "Where's my ashtray?" And he goes, "This doesn't have enough leg room." And I remember somebody said, and it was grave to question a VP, but he said, "Sir, this is a minivan that is being developed for moms." And moms aren't 6'4" and 250 pounds, and they don't smoke cigars. And I remember not putting an ashtray in that minivan was a big decision because most moms would say, "I don't want an ashtray in my minivan. My kids are in here." And but that again, maybe if it was 5 years earlier when that VP left, they say, "Put a damn ashtray in that car and get some more leg room, because how is the boss going to drive this minivan, even though he's not buying the minivan?" So anyway, enough of my blather, but getting that customer input, it means you have to really live with them. And I know that's probably sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I know you guys do some drive-alongs with these guys.
Yeah, it is a big deal to immerse yourself in it. The other challenge that I'll say is that even though we have this very overt engagement with the end users, it's also our job as a technology provider to stay two steps ahead of them. Because what they're talking about today is today's problem, and it's my job to stay two steps ahead of them. So that's the other challenge is in our prototyping of building our next gen technology, we're also doing some things like purposefully not including something that they would expect to see if anyone notices and if it comes up. And so we're taking some pretty large bets in things that you won't see in the next gen technology. And then we're putting it out there and we're getting all kinds of feedback on it. In some cases, we have been shocked by what people didn't point out as missing. And in other cases, it was like, all right, no SHIT. Of course, we should have had that in there. It's been really fascinating to as we engage more. And the other part of this is the people building our technologies all have very strong domain expertise. As we were talking about earlier, going back to some of the basics, we've just had to go to the basics because I'm a trucker at heart. My Brian Mulshine, who leads our maintenance offering, he came from that OEM world. And so he knows that better than the product side of things. So we have to use very common back to basics practices to move this forward.
Yep. And I've said this before on my podcast, but I know you guys are doing it. I think in the past we had what I'll call clunky tech. And if you went to work, you had clunky tech. But then we got all of this really fancy tech at home. And I feel like we got it at home first. Now that when I go to work, I expect my technology to have that consumer grade feel. There's no extra steps. There's no extra buttons. There's no hit F9 to go to a different screen or, oh, you didn't know to press these three buttons at the same time to get that field. No, none of that. It has to be super intuitive. Because again, we're at using, the driver might be using his phone and then he can't switch to the Trimble technology and say, "Oh yeah, this phone is beautiful. Everything I'm doing is so intuitive and easy." And then I've switched to Trimble and it's, "Oh my God, I have to read the instruction manual." No one wants to read the manuals.
Got it. You got it. A funny story on that part. As we are building out our next gen TMS, the first module that we delivered is the order module. So, really, that customer service rep's job, essentially. And within that technology, as we introduced that and got that out there, we were asking, like, okay, we want your person that's going to hate leaving a green screen in our early engagement portal. And then we want like your new hire, the person that's, I don't even know what to do in this green screen. We want both of those parties in here because we need that voice of both in order to make sure that we're truly building something that comes to life in a way that's usable and will be adopted. Because we have to ease some of those people that have been in the industry for a long time into this.
Yep. Yep. And again, I think that I've experienced this myself with technologies. Sometimes there's a technology that you really like and it gets a little more complicated, but it adds a little more sophisticated, but it has a lot more impact. And I think there's always that debate in designer's mind is I can add this and this, but it's going to make it more complicated to use. And I think what we all are looking for is I want it to be so simple that even when I have a brand new team, I don't have to go, oh, yeah, you have to attend the training seminar or watch 10 videos online to use this. Because let's face it, drivers are supposed to be driving. They're not going to spend time learning how to use your new tech.
You got it. Our measure of success as we move our technology forward, as we rolled out that order module that I mentioned earlier, we gave some of our beta customers, here's your login and here's the 10 things we want you to do in the technology, have at it. And they were able to do it, right? And so this kind of changes how Trimble has to think about how we implement our business, where we get to use that talent that used to spend a lot of time implementing can now be working on adoption of products. So it creates this really nice evolution of how we operate.
Yep. So I know you guys are your main customers are these carriers. And who else do you guys work with?
Yeah, so we have this really great customer base of asset based carriers. The carriers also, in almost all cases, have a non asset division, a brokerage arm to their business. And then we really start to eke into a lot of the partnership areas that I mentioned as customers, also, because as we're building our technology and we recognize, like an example that I often use, as we create our optimizer where we're matching orders to drivers, we'll have one within our technology, but some of our carriers or our customers that we do business with already have an optimizer, whether they built it themselves or whether there's one of those startups that they have said yes to. We also want to make sure that we can introduce those workflows directly into the technology. And so we've created ability to expand our customer base by inviting kind of partners into the mix as well.
Yeah. It's nice that your North Star, though, is the carriers and the drivers. And so if we can grow from there, it's a good thing. And obviously, you're going to have to involve shippers and brokers and all the rest. And by the way, I know you're very carrier and drivers centric, but I know there's these freight brokers that are out there. And I do believe that we've seen a growth in the brokerages. Used to say, oh, you're either a broker or you're a carrier, but I will say now it feels like some of the very best brokerages have heritage in trucking and might have a trucking division. And I've worked for the companies like that, and they always say we started our brokerage or our 3PL side to get us home. We had empty miles, so we used to always call the broker down the street and say, help us. Now we decided, hey, we're going to own our own. And I always think it's not necessarily the largest brokerages out there, but they're, in my mind, some of the best because of where they come from.
That very core of things, I think, is the perfect balance. If I was at a carrier, that's the balance that I would be trying to achieve. I always have to optimize my network first and foremost. And in some cases, I got too much freight and not enough drivers. And in that case, I can move some of that freight over to that other division. And in some cases, on the brokerage side of things, you've got the opposite problem. And so they really can end up complementing each other really well. So to me, it's a great sign and a great success story when you have that perfect merging of those two.
Yep. It wouldn't be my podcast lately unless I talked to you about AI. So talk a little bit about the impact of AI on some of your tools. That's artificial intelligence, as if I'm educating someone on that.
This has been really an area that we haven't necessarily leveraged wholeheartedly previously. So we have a fabulous data science team at Trimble Transportation. And that team had been creating products that maybe you could consider bolting onto a technology. And so we started saying we've got to just work that right into the actual workflows of that, again, those front end users. And so some of the things that they have introduced in our next gen technology has just been phenomenal. Really easy things like an AI assistant to help navigate within or to ask questions with, that's been wildly successful, all the way to some really complicated algorithms where we can start predicting up to 7 days out with a very high percentage of certainty what supply demand balance looks like in a heat map for portion. There's a lot of companies that have tried to figure out the supply demand balance and to predict what that looks like pretty far out. And we'll be at our Insight conference, we'll have some of that data science talent there talking about the certainty level that they're able to achieve with that AI that we're applying in our technologies. So we're really fortunate to have such good talent there that has been able to prove these things. And they're so diligent about proving it with real life data. We're also really lucky that our carriers say, yes, please use our data where we have the permission to do so. We've got a lot of carriers that are great about saying, we'll only be better if you're better on this front. Great success stories on that front.
Yeah, I think we started talking about AI a few years ago, and then it felt like there was this lull. And I think I know what that lull was, is companies like yours who do have the data scientists on board realized probably pretty quickly that we have to make sure this data is right. I've heard people say we're in an AI readiness phase. And so that was, and I think we're getting past that. And companies like yours, the technology companies, are getting past it. But I sometimes think the weak link in our AI transition is going to be the information that humans entered in. We're the weak link because we're the ones who said it got here just before 12 rather than it got here 12:15 because we get penalized if it got here after 12. And I think we're going to get to the place where we have more IoT, Internet of Things, the data that is not going to fib to make sure that that the proper dates were met. So cleaning all that up, I call it the dirty data, cleaning that all up is not easy. We need to filter it all.
Gosh, that's such a key point. And this is the one area that if I had to pray for one thing to change in this industry, it really is some standard, even terminology that would help that come to fruition would be wildly helpful. I also think on that AI side of things, some of that lull is there had been the adoption of AI from just a trust standpoint is something that we take really seriously on the Trimble side as well. So you'll see some "are you sure" type questions in the technology to get people for that, to get people past that first uncertainty. And so we've really figured out some nice ways. There's such a talented product and engineering team working on these where we'll do that, ease people into it, and then we'll let the AI get smarter and smarter to a point where we don't have to have that.
Yeah, I think if you once you like it, it gets better every day, and that's the nice thing about it. But I think the upfront, when you start adopting it, you have to make sure it makes sense. It's like anything that was created by a computer where you say, oh, here's what our business intelligence tells us. We'll use your intelligence to determine if that even makes any sense, because I think we've all played around with ChatGPT or Google Gemini for content creation. And when you're playing with that, sometimes you have to go, is this even right? like, like, where did you get this? Because it's not doing the gut check. It doesn't say, does this make sense? It's spitting it out. And if you start running your business by it and it's not right, obviously I could be happy. And Trimble can't do that. It's you've got too many people counting on you to say, oh yeah, we wanted to rush this AI product ahead and hopefully it works. That's just not going to be part of your company's DNA.
Absolutely not. Yeah, this again, it really for me boils down to the talent that's driving these products comes from this long line of having done the job of in the trucking organization.
Yep. So I'm gonna try and wrap this up. I'm gonna try and summarize what we talked about. Then I'll get your final thoughts on it. So I'm gonna do the best I can on this. So I'm talking to my friend Kelly Williams. We're talking about revolutionizing the road. Trimble's tech solution. So we talked all about some of the technology solutions that you guys have. And again, I think you guys fly under the radar Trimble, but everybody recognizes the brands that are underneath Trimble. And it's a huge company. And we'll see you at Trimble Insight September 15th to the 17th out in Las Vegas. So we talked about the impact of technology on trucking productivity, which really has not been there. We've spent so much money, all of the talk of all the VCs and all of the new companies that popped up and all the consolidations, but we aren't making the job necessarily better for drivers and carriers. These are still not, I just talked to somebody on my podcast about a carrier. It's a very difficult business still. So we haven't made it a better world for carriers to be in. And I should note this. You mentioned Craig Fuller earlier from FreightWaves. Every time I look at FreightWaves articles, it'll say this company closed their carrier division and are keeping their brokerage division. And that's like such a common story. And I always think we've got to figure this out. Not everybody can be on the technology. Not everybody can be on the broker side. We need drivers and carriers to do well to make this business work. But anyway, we talked about the technology not making productivity grow in the trucking space flat. And you talked about why that is, which is just this disconnected workflow, fragmented workflows, and just not having the technology have the impact it was supposed to have. And we talked about some of the Trimble technology that's going to make that productivity happen. And you guys are already working with 90% of the top 200 carriers, so you know what you're doing. Put a big old bow on this one, Kelly Williams. Final thoughts.
Gosh, I would say that from my personal standpoint and on behalf of what the talented Trimble product team is building, it's really important that we combine our long proven technology with that deep industry knowledge to deliver the things that impact the front user. So that's my tagline.
I like it. I like it. So one more time, tell us about Trimble Insight. Who's going to be there and who is supposed to be there?
Yeah. Join us at Trimble Insight, where you get to see all of those underlying brands that Joe just referenced, where you'll get demos out on the floor that our team does such a good job of setting up in a really nice, fluid way with great hors d'oeuvres and cocktails along the way. So it makes it even more enjoyable.
I like it.
Yeah. And then you have this really nice mix of both Trimble products as well as really industry leaders from a technology standpoint. And as we talked about earlier, in some cases competitive, but it's really important that we make the transportation industry overall better. And so we'll have all the right players and all the right speakers there for that experience.
Yep. And then there's going to be a lot of carriers there, right?
Yes. We typically have about 900 plus carriers there, and we will have a exclusive code for our listeners to get a discount to attend the Insight conference.
Good. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I think, again, it's an invaluable time to come and see the trucking companies because, again, I just think there's not enough of that. I've gone to lots of conferences, and every once in a while you meet a trucking company, but that's not always the case. It's just they're busy. They're busy. They don't come to these conferences because they're on usually tighter margins than a lot of the other rest of the industry. One other conference I want to mention, because I'm going to it, NMFTA is having a conference in Cleveland, and Trimble is the sponsor for that. And that is a cybersecurity conference. I'm assuming you guys are involved with the security. That's a big issue for the whole industry. And I know Trimble wouldn't be sponsoring it if they weren't doing something in that space.
Yes, spot on. This is an area that all the way from our CEO, Rob Painter, to every person in our organization, there's a very wide accountability, a great investment made on Trimble's part in both talent and resources as well as technology.
Yep. So I'll put a link to that NMF, that's National Motor Freight Traffic Association. That's the LTL standard setting organization. So I'll see you guys down in Cleveland, and that's in late October. I think it's the 27th, 28th, 29th, but whatever it is, I'll put a link to that also in the show notes. And I know you'll be at some other conferences. Do you know what conferences you'll be at? I wrote some down.
Yeah, I think there is a handful of them that we are typically at, especially with our team from our MAPS division at the E2 Open conference. So all of kind of the shipper TMS conferences, we have a really nice presence at, as well as on the telematics side, we're attendee with those as well. So you get this broad Trimble presence at almost every conference out there
I know
because
you'll
we,
be at McLeod.
yes, yes.
So we'll see you for sure in Vegas, and that's the Trimble Insight Tech Conference. We'll also see you at McLeod, E2 Open, NMFTA is where you guys will be a sponsor. That's in Cleveland. And then the ATA, where's the ATA conference? Where's that one at?
Gosh,
I don't know. I'll put the link in the show notes. So anyway,
that is a great conference, though. And actually, that's where, from a data collection standpoint, as we were talking about earlier, that is a division of ATRI, is a division of the ATA. So that's a great spot to access that talented team as well.
excellent. Excellent. Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I finally got to talk to somebody from Trimble on the pod.
Excellent. I am delighted to be the first Trimble representative, and I look forward to more of those logos showing up on your podcast.
Thank you so much. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support is very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.